They kicked me out the same night I told them I was pregnant. No yelling. No questions. Just a command to pack my things and get out. I was 17, standing in my childhood bedroom with a duffel bag half-zipped and my father's voice echoing down the hall like a gavel slamming down in court. My mother didn't look at me. I remember that more than anything, that she looked through me like I'd already disappeared. But here's the thing. I wasn't caught off guard. Not really. They thought I was some naive little girl who'd made a mess of her life and would come crawling back. What they didn't know is I'd already rented a room in a basement 2 towns over. I had a job lined up at a 24-hour diner and a bank envelope in my purse with $600 saved from babysitting, tip jars, and one unexpected gift from my grandfather 6 months earlier. He'd handed it to me without a word, just said, "For when you need it." I didn't ask questions. I never told anyone. I just nodded and tucked it away like a lifeline I hoped I'd never need. I left without looking back. That was 15 years ago. Now I'm 32. Head of trauma at a medical center in Lexington. I own my home. My son is 15, calm, respectful, honors student. He brings me tea when I stay up too late charting cases. We talk like friends, but he knows I'm mom first. I don't yell, but he listens the first time. That's the kind of home I built. And this afternoon, like some twisted time warp, my parents showed up at my door. They just stood there, on my porch. Same stern eyes, same tense shoulders. My father looked at the house, the car, the garden boxes. Then at me. "You did all this?" I paused. My hand was on the doorframe. I could have slammed it. I didn't. I just said, "No. I built myself." People think there's a clear line between before and after, but that's not how it works. The lead up was slow, like a leak in the ceiling you don't notice until your floor warps. Back then, I lived under constant judgment dressed up as love. My parents didn't scream or slap. They used silence like a leash. If I wore mascara, I was asking for attention. If I came home 5 minutes late, my dad would sit at the kitchen table, Bible open, not saying a word, just looking at me like I'd brought shame through the door. I learned early to keep things hidden, emotions, questions, dreams, and eventually the pregnancy. I didn't even cry when I saw the test. Just stared at it like it was a countdown clock starting. I didn't think about telling the guy. He was long gone, one of those come-pick-me-up types who never picked anyone up but always expected to be rescued. I knew if I told my parents, I'd be out. So I gave myself a deadline. 2 months. Save money. Find a place. Get out before they threw me out. The only person who seemed to see me was my grandfather. He wasn't warm exactly, just present. Sometimes I'd find a banana bread on the porch in Tupperware. Or a 20 tucked into a book he lent me. I think he suspected more than he ever let on. One day, we were driving to the hardware store in silence, and he handed me a small envelope. No smile. No speech. Just said, "Keep it safe." It felt heavier than it looked. I didn't open it until that night. It was a check for $1,500 made out to me. No memo line. No return address. Just his name. I remember sitting on my bed staring at it, heart racing, like I was holding proof that someone thought I might make it. I didn't tell anyone, especially not my parents. In the mornings, I went to school. In the evenings, I worked the cash register at a gas station, lied about my age, and kept saltines in my bag to help with the nausea. I smiled, got straight A's, went to youth group like nothing was wrong. I kept pretending everything was normal, even as the truth grew inside me. I didn't plan on telling them that night. It just slipped out. Dinner was the same as always. My mom made dry chicken. My dad said grace too long. I sat there chewing slowly, feeling my stomach churn, not from nerves, but from the morning sickness that never quite left. My jeans were getting tight and I was starting to wear loose hoodies even though it was July. He was going on about someone at church getting divorced. "Disgraceful," he muttered. "Girls today think they can just live however they want." And I don't know why I said it. Maybe I was tired of hiding, or maybe I wanted to end it on my terms, but I looked up and said, "I'm pregnant." The silence was instant. Not stunned. Not confused. Just dead. My father didn't raise his voice. He just stood up from the table and said, "Pack your things." That was it. No, who? No, are you okay? No, Like he'd already decided what the punishment should be if I ever failed to meet their version of godliness. My mom didn't even blink. She just started clearing plates, as if dinner had ended early. I went in my room and zipped the duffel I'd been quietly prepping for weeks. Toiletries. Socks. My old iPod. I left the bookshelf untouched. I knew I wasn't coming back. When I stepped into the hallway, my dad was waiting near the door with his arms crossed. He didn't even ask where I was going. Just opened the door and said, "This house will not be a haven for sin." Those words stayed with me longer than the cold air that hit my face. I walked out with my head high, even if my legs were shaking. I spent that night in the basement room I'd signed the lease for the week before. The windows were small. The walls smelled like mildew. But the bed was mine, and no one told me I didn't belong. That was the first time I realized the truth wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, sharp, final. They didn't love me for who I was. They loved me when I fit. I kept waiting for them to call. Even after everything, some part of me thought the phone would ring. Maybe my mom would whisper late at night, ask if I was okay. Maybe my dad would cool down, drive over, demand I come home, but softer this time. I imagined them realizing they overreacted, regretting how fast they slammed the door. But the phone stayed silent. The first week, I blamed myself. I kept thinking, if I'd waited another month to tell them, if I'd softened it, if I'd said I was sorry, as if packaging my pain better might have made it easier for them to swallow. The basement apartment was tiny. The walls were thin, and I could hear the guy upstairs watching sports at midnight. But it was mine. I taped an ultrasound photo to the inside of the fridge door like a promise. I read what to expect in between shifts at the diner. My boss gave me extra hours and never asked questions. He called me kid, even when I was showing. Sometimes I missed my dad's voice, even the cold version of it. I missed my mom folding towels while humming some old gospel song. The absence of their voices was louder than any scream. I went to one free counseling session at a women's clinic and told the therapist, "I think my parents are just scared." She looked at me for a long time before saying, "They may be scared, but that's not the same as being kind." That line stuck with me, because deep down, I still believed their love was somewhere in there, buried under church rules and control. I thought maybe once the baby came, they'd want to see him. That maybe the sight of a soft little boy would melt something. I was wrong. The baby came, and no one came with him. The nights were the worst. I'd finish a 6-hour shift at the diner on aching feet, ride the bus home with my belly tight and heavy, then spend half the night lying awake, wondering how I was going to raise a child when I could barely raise myself. Sometimes I'd wake up in the dark thinking I'd heard my mom calling my name. It was always just the wind or the pipes or my imagination begging for something familiar. Nathan was born on a Thursday morning in late February in a county hospital with flickering lights and nurses too tired to fake smiles. I held him and cried, not just because he was beautiful or breathing or real, but because I was terrified. There was no one in the waiting room. No flowers. No camera flashes. Just me and this tiny, red-faced person who didn't ask to be here. I thought maybe they'd come, that someone from the past would appear. But no one did. I named him Nathan. It means gift, even if I wasn't sure yet who was giving or receiving. The first few months were a blur of diapers, night feedings, and cheap instant coffee. I went back to work after 3 weeks, wearing an oversized sweater and clutching a breast pump in my purse. My manager said I could work shorter shifts for less pay. I nodded. I didn't have room to complain. And then one day, a letter arrived. No return address. No handwriting. Just a printed envelope with my name. Inside was a check. $2,000. Signed, George Barrett. My hands shook so badly, I had to sit down. I hadn't seen or spoken to my grandfather since the day I left. I didn't know how he found me, but I knew what this was. It was his way of saying, "I see you." No lecturas. No pity. Just help, quiet and solid like the man himself. Meanwhile, my parents sent nothing. Not even a card. I overheard someone at church. I still stopped by sometimes to light candles when no one was there, say my mom told people I'd gone off the rails. That I'd refused to come home. That lie settled in my gut like sour milk. But I was too tired to fight it. Instead, I folded the check and placed it behind Nathan's birth certificate. Proof that someone still believed in me. I didn't notice the shift at first. It was small, like air warming before a storm. Nathan was about 2, and I was taking anatomy classes at the community college. I'd leave him with a neighbor, rush to campus with peanut butter crackers in my bag and dry shampoo in my hair, sit in the back of the lecture hall, and try not to fall asleep. I barely scraped by that semester. But one professor, a woman in her 50s with laugh lines and zero tolerance for bullshit, pulled me aside after class one day. "You're better than you think," she said. "You don't talk much, but when you do, it's sharp. You should apply to nursing school." I wanted to laugh.
Me?
A nurse? But something in the way she said it, like she meant it, got under my skin. That night, I looked at Nathan sleeping in his crib, his little fingers twitching in a dream, and I thought, what if I did? Not for prestige. Not for revenge. Just to give us a life with fewer corners to cut. A life where I didn't have to count change at the pharmacy or hope the lights stayed on through the winter. I applied. The interview was terrifying. I had to borrow slacks from a friend. I wore a blouse with a stain I tried to hide with my hair. But I told the truth. I told them I worked, parented, studied. I told them I didn't need easy. I just needed a chance. And I got in. I still remember holding the acceptance letter in my hands like it might vanish if I blinked. Nathan was eating dried Cheerios on the floor, and I just sat down beside him and cried. Big, ugly, quiet tears. That was the moment. Not when I finished school. Not when I became a doctor later. No, it was that day on the floor, knees to linoleum, hands shaking over an envelope. That's when I realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I was building something. By the time I turned 30, I had a degree, a license, a job at a regional hospital, and a kid who still hugged me every time I walked in the door, even when he had homework. My apartment had real windows, framed art, and enough space for a couch I didn't find on the side of the road. I didn't realize how far I'd come until my past rang the doorbell. It was a Saturday. I was on the porch watering the basil Nathan insisted we grow, even though we always forgot to use it. I heard gravel shift. Looked up, and there they were. My parents, standing like statues. My father in that same stiff polo he always wore to church. My mother clinging to her purse strap like it was a seatbelt in turbulence. It was jarring how little they had changed. My first instinct was to shut the door that hadn't even opened yet. But I froze. Not out of fear, just disbelief. My father looked around the yard. The flowers Nathan planted in science club. The car I finally paid off. The front door I painted myself. Then he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "So, you did all right for yourself." Like I'd just taken a different route to the grocery store. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside and let them in. Not because I owed them that, but because I needed to see it for myself. How they'd look in my space. What they'd say with their own eyes on the life they had refused to help build. Inside, Nathan was at the kitchen table doing algebra. He looked up and said, "Hi," like they were delivery people. He didn't flinch. He didn't look impressed or scared. Just polite. That's what stunned them, I think. Not the house. Not me.
The boy.
Well-behaved.
Kind.
Confident. Everything they swore he wouldn't be without them. And for the first time, I saw it on their faces. Doubt. Not in me. In themselves. I watched them look around my house like tourists who didn't speak the language. My dad kept his hands clasped like he was in church. My mom stared at the photos on the wall. Nathan at the science fair. Me in scrubs holding a newborn. Our dog sleeping under a blanket. They didn't say much. Just looked. And I realized something. They didn't recognize this life because they had nothing to do with building it. They didn't know the sound of Nathan's laugh or how he always adds cinnamon to pancakes. They didn't know I like silence now, that I can go whole evenings with just a cup of tea and a book and feel completely full. They didn't know that I'd survive the nights I thought I'd break. That I stopped praying for them to change. They were strangers in my home. My real home. My dad tried to ask about my job, what exactly I did, how I got there, but the words came out stilted. My mom asked if Nathan had been baptized. When I said no, she blinked like I'd cursed in church. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I just watched them squirm in the presence of something they didn't control. That's when it hit me. I wasn't the broken one. I never was. I had bent myself into shapes for years to fit their version of worthy. But that wasn't love. That was performance. And when I stopped performing, they walked away. Now they were back, and I saw it in their faces. They wanted the credit. Or at least, the comfort of pretending they hadn't been cruel. But I wouldn't give them that. Not because I hated them. Because I finally loved myself more. We sat in the living room like we were waiting for a bus. No one really spoke. The tension didn't rise. It just sat there, thick and quiet, like fog. Then my dad asked casually, like he was asking what time it was, "So, who helped you?" I knew what he meant. He wanted to believe someone stepped in. That I didn't do this alone. That some man came along and saved me, or that Grandpa raised my son in secret. Because if someone else helped, then they didn't fail as badly as they did. I didn't flinch. Just said, "Grandpa." I watched his face shift. Just slightly. His mouth twitched. His eyes narrowed, then relaxed. My mom turned her head like she didn't want to hear the rest. "He sent a check," I added. "Twice. No pras. No scolding. Just the facts." I didn't mention the nights I bled through my scrubs or the time I cried into a broken breast pump in a diner bathroom. I didn't tell them that Nathan had once asked if I had grandparents because he never saw any. I didn't say that for years. I still saved a seed in my head for the parents I wished I had. Instead, I told them about Nathan's GPA, his love of biology, how he wants to be a vet. My mom nodded along, but her smile was glass. My dad kept glancing around the house like he was trying to find something to critique. But there was nothing to pick at. No dust. No mes. No proof of failure. Just me. Whole. Standing. They stayed for maybe 20 minutes. Then my dad stood up and said, "Well, we should get going." Like they'd just stopped by after church. Like this wasn't 15 years of absence reduced to a visit shorter than a dentist appointment. I walked them to the door. He turned and said, "You did all right." And I said it again, calm as glass. "No, I built myself." When the door clicked shut behind them, I didn't move right away. I stood there, hand still on the knob, breathing in the silence like it was a new language. It wasn't peaceful. Not yet. But it was mine. Nathan padded into the hallway, socks sliding on the hardwood. He looked at me and said, "Are they coming back?" I shrugged. "Maybe." He nodded, then asked, "Do they want to be part of our life now?" I didn't have a clean answer for that. So I told him the truth. They had a choice. 15 years ago, they didn't pick us. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm glad you did." That hit harder than anything else that day. We ended up watching a movie together that night. Something dumb and loud. He made popcorn and dumped too much salt in it. Halfway through, I laughed so hard I cried. And I let myself cry, really cry for the first time in years. Not from pain. From release. I wasn't grieving what I lost anymore. I was finally done trying to fix a story that was never mine to rewrite. They had told themselves a version where I was the sinner, the runaway, the rebellious daughter who slammed doors and turned her back on family. It was easier that way. They didn't have to look at what they actually did. Abandon me the second I stopped being useful to their image. And now they'd shown up expecting warmth. Expecting the same quiet girl who took what she was given. But she didn't live here anymore. In her place was a woman who'd carried a child, a degree, a life, and never dropped a single one. A week later, my phone rang while I was folding laundry. Emily. It was Grandpa. I hadn't heard his voice in years. It was slower now, rougher. But steady. I heard they came by. I didn't ask how. He always knew more than he let on. "Yeah," I said. "They came. They saw." He didn't say anything for a while. Then, "They say anything worth hearing?" I smiled without meaning to. "They asked who helped me." He gave a soft snort. "And you told them?" I told them the truth. There was a pause. And then he said, "I didn't do much." I shook my head, though he couldn't see it. "You did exactly enough." We didn't talk much after that. Just a few updates about Nathan. Some silence that wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence you earn. That night, after dishes and homework and reminders to unplug the chargers, I sat on the porch alone. The sky was clear. The air smelled like basil and distant rain. I thought about that night I left home with a duffel bag and no one looking behind me. About the check in an envelope with no return address. About the nights I prayed to be seen and the years I stopped needing to be. People ask sometimes if I've forgiven them. My parents. I tell them, I forgave myself. For believing I was the problem. For shrinking. For hoping they'd change. And if you're wondering if I'd open the door again, I might. But not for who they were. Only if they come as strangers, willing to listen. Not as ghosts, expecting a seat. Because this house, this piece, this version of me, they didn't build any of it. I built myself.